Dear viewers, tell me, what would you do if the man you loved, the one you trusted with your entire soul, carried a secret so deep that you only discovered it the day you buried him? What if your last goodbye was also the first step into a nightmare? This is the story of Grace Williams. And once you hear what she discovered at her husband's funeral, dear friends, you may never look at love or loyalty the same way again. But before we begin, if you are watching this right now, take a moment, like this video, subscribe to Voices of Reality, and tell us in the comments where you're joining from. Because tonight's story isn't just Grace's. It's yours, mine, ours. A reflection of the fragile line between devotion and deception. She was born Grace Ann Williams in Louisville, Kentucky. Her childhood was not one of luxury, but one of resilience. Grace's mother, Patricia, worked long shifts as a nurse at Norton Hospital, often coming home in her scrubs smelling faintly of antiseptic and exhaustion. Her father, Henry, ran a small auto repair shop, his hands always scarred with grease and burns. Grace grew up in a small, two-bedroom house on the west side of town, where creaky floorboards sang like a lullaby at night, and winters meant bundling beneath hand-stitched quilts to stay warm. Yet, dear viewers, despite the hardship, there was laughter. Grace's father had a way of making every broken thing seem fixable. Not just cars, but hearts, too. Her mother hummed gospel songs while cooking cornbread in a cast-iron skillet, filling the house with warmth even when the electricity bill sat unpaid on the counter. Grace grew up with dreams. Dreams of becoming a nurse like her mother. Dreams of building a family where love reigned stronger than hardship. But above all, she dreamed of loyalty. Because from the youngest age, she believed love meant never having to wonder if someone would stay. She was 22 when she met Daniel Brooks. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that always seemed to fall just perfectly across his forehead. He had that easy laugh, the kind of laugh that rolled through a room and pulled every eye toward him. They met at a church picnic, where Grace was serving potato salad beneath a wide Kentucky sky. He walked up, his plate empty, his smile full of mischief. "Miss," he said, tipping his head slightly, "I hear you make the best potato salad in all of Jefferson County." Grace laughed, brushing off his charm, but his persistence wore her down. By the end of that summer, he was no longer the stranger who made her blush. He was the man who carried her books to night classes, the man who stayed up late helping her study anatomy diagrams, the man who whispered, "One day, I'm going to marry you." And marry her he did. They wed in the same Baptist church where her parents had once exchanged vows. It was a modest wedding, lace gown borrowed from her cousin, simple navy suit for Daniel, hymns sung off-key by family who couldn't afford a choir. But to Grace, it felt like heaven itself. Life wasn't easy, dear viewers. Grace juggled nursing school while working part-time at a diner. Daniel found work as a contractor, building houses across the city. They struggled. There were bills that outpaced paychecks, arguments late at night about money, tears shed quietly into pillows so the children wouldn't hear. Yes, children. Within 6 years, Grace gave birth to 2. A son, Michael, with his father's strong jaw, and a daughter, Lily, who carried her mother's gentle eyes. From the outside, the Williams family looked blessed. Neighbors saw a hard-working couple, raising their children, attending church every Sunday. To their children, Grace and Daniel were an unshakable foundation. But dear friends, sometimes the walls of a house hide cracks no one else can see. And Daniel carried a secret that would one day make those walls collapse. Daniel was 46 when he passed. The doctors said it was sudden cardiac arrest. Grace had kissed him goodbye that morning as he left for work, never knowing it would be the last time she felt the warmth of his lips. When the phone rang that afternoon, her world shattered. The children screamed. The neighbors gathered. The church ladies came with casseroles, as though food could fill the hole carved into Grace's chest. And then came the funeral. Oh, dear viewers, Have you ever walked into a church knowing you will leave with less than you entered? Grace wore black, her veil trembling as much as her hands. She clutched her children's palms, whispering, "We'll be okay." Somehow, the sanctuary was packed. The smell of lilies pressed heavy in the air. The pastor's voice cracked as he spoke of Daniel's life, his service, his loyalty. But Grace, she sat in the front pew, staring at the closed casket, whispering inside her soul, "Why so soon? Why now? Why me?" And just when she thought her heart couldn't bear more, the first whisper of his secret stepped through those church doors. It began with a glance. A woman, slim, composed, with auburn hair neatly tied back, slipped quietly into the church. She wore no veil, no obvious grief. Her eyes searched the room with precision, not sorrow. Grace didn't know her, neither did the children. But the woman's gaze locked onto the casket, and then onto Grace. There was something unsettling in that stare. It wasn't pity. It wasn't condolence. It was ownership. When the final hymn ended, when the pastor invited family to speak, the woman stood. She cleared her throat. Her voice rang out through the sanctuary like a stone tossed into still water. "My name is Caroline," she said, "and before you bury this man, there is something you all should know." Gasps rippled across the pews. Grace's hands went cold. The pastor tried to intervene, but Caroline raised a trembling hand. And what she revealed, dear viewers, was the first crack in the coffin of Daniel's legacy. "My name is Caroline," the woman said, her voice steady, though her hands trembled as they clutched a folded piece of paper. "And before you lay this man to rest, there is something you all deserve to know." The congregation shifted uneasily. Murmurs rose like a storm gathering speed. Grace's heart thudded in her chest. Her children leaned against her, confused, frightened. Caroline took a breath, her gaze locking on Grace. "Daniel Brooks was not just your husband," she said softly. "He was mine too." The sanctuary froze. Gasps cut through the silence. The pastor's Bible slipped from his hand and struck the pulpit with a dull thud. Grace blinked, shaking her head, whispering, "No, no, no." Under her breath, Caroline's voice wavered. "For 12 years, Daniel lived with me in Lexington. We shared a home and a son." At that, she motioned toward the back. And dear viewers, out stepped a boy of about 11 years old. His eyes, Daniel's eyes, wide and afraid. Grace couldn't breathe. Her world tilted. The boy's face mirrored Michael's, her own son, down to the curve of his chin. There was no denying the truth. The crowd erupted. Whispers turned into shouts. "Is this real? Lord, have mercy. How could he?" Grace stumbled forward, gripping the pew to steady herself. Her daughter clutched her arm, crying. "Lies," Grace whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "She's lying. She has to be." But Caroline unfolded the paper. "This is his handwriting. Letters he wrote to me while traveling for work. Promises. Receipts of money he sent. Proof, Grace. I'm sorry. I never wanted to ruin this day, but I couldn't let him be buried as a saint when half his life was hidden in shadows." The pastor tried to calm the crowd, but the truth had already cracked the room open like glass under pressure. And Grace? She collapsed into her seat, tears spilling freely, her black veil soaking with grief and betrayal. Dear viewers, have you ever noticed how quickly casseroles turn cold? In the days after the funeral, neighbors who once sang praises of Daniel now avoided Grace's eyes. Some whispered sympathy, others judgment. Children at school pointed at Michael and Lily, whispering, "Your daddy had another family." Grace couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at Daniel's photo on the mantel. "Who were you?" she asked the silence. "What life did you live without me?" Bills piled on the counter, and then came the knock at the door. It was Caroline. She held no malice in her face, only exhaustion. And behind her, the boy, Daniel's other son, whose name was James. "I'm not here to fight," Caroline said softly. "But the truth is, Daniel left us both with nothing. No insurance, no savings, just questions. And now, our children are half-brother and sister. What do we do with that?" Grace wanted to slam the door, to scream, to curse, but she saw James's eyes. Innocent, lost, mirrors of the man who had lied to them both. "Go," Grace whispered, her voice breaking. I can't deal with this right now." Caroline nodded, tears brimming. "I'll give you time, but Grace, the truth doesn't go away. We'll have to face it." And with that, she left. Dear viewers, can you imagine? One moment you bury your husband. The next, you learn you were never his only wife. Would you crumble, or would you rise? In the weeks that followed, Grace searched. She dug through drawers, bank statements, phone records, and the deeper she searched, the darker it became. Receipts for hotels 2 hours away. Credit card charges in Lexington. Letters tucked beneath the lining of his old coat. Letters signed Love, Caroline. It was undeniable. Daniel had lived a double life. Grace wept until her body ached. At night, she clutched her children, whispering, "I'm so sorry. I didn't know." But as broken as she was, she also felt something else. Anger. Because betrayal, dear friends, is a thief. It doesn't just steal trust. It steals identity. Grace no longer knew who she was, or what her marriage had even meant. Within months, the truth spilled into court. Caroline filed for recognition of her son's inheritance. Grace fought to protect her children's share. The courtroom was tense, packed with curious neighbors and silent judgment. Caroline testified first, presenting evidence, letters, financial transfers, photos of Daniel with James. Then came Grace. She stood, hands trembling, voice raw. "I gave this man 20 years. I bore his children. I trusted him with everything. And now I learn I was not his only wife. I ask you, Your Honor, what justice is there for the ones left behind?" The judge's gavel fell. Daniel's estate was to be divided equally among all 3 children. Gasps filled the room. Grace collapsed into tears. And Caroline? She wept too, not from triumph but from pain. Because in the end, dear viewers, betrayal leaves no winners. Grace left the courthouse shattered. Her children walked beside her, their small hands clinging to hers. She looked up at the sky and whispered, "God, give me strength, because I don't know how to survive this." And dear friends, strength was coming, but so was another twist, because secrets rarely come alone. And Daniel's grave had not yet finished speaking. Dear viewers, grief tests a person, but danger exposes what's left when the heart is already torn. Grace Williams had survived the funeral, the stranger, the confession, the courtroom. She had survived the sideways glances in the grocery store, the pity in the church foyer, the whispers that clung to her kids' backpacks like burrs. But there was a knock coming, one that did not belong to grief or gossip. It belonged to something colder, something that smelled like diesel and cheap cologne, something that Daniel had invited into their lives long before his last breath. On a Tuesday morning in late October, the Kentucky air had turned brittle. The maples along the street had surrendered their leaves, and the wind pressed those leaves against the Williams front steps like forgotten letters. Inside, Grace stood with her hands on the kitchen counter, staring at a stack of mail. Past due notices, medical bills from a visit Daniel never told her about, an unfamiliar credit card statement with purchases from hardware stores 2 counties away. "Mama," Lily's small voice floated in. "The milk is, it smells funny." Grace lifted the carton and felt shame prick at her eyes. She'd never wanted her children to know the taste of struggle, the way she had. but the refrigerator shelves were nearly bare. The casserole pans were empty. Pity only feeds a family for a week, dear viewers. After that, you are left with your faith and your grit. Grace took a breath. "We'll be all right," she whispered to herself, then louder for the kids. "Toast and eggs tonight. Payday's Friday." She didn't add that the eggs were the last dozen. She didn't say that payday wouldn't stretch far enough to cover the rent and the car insurance and the stack of letters that grew heavier each morning. The phone rang at 9:17 p.m. that night. An unknown number. Grace stared at it while the kids brushed their teeth down the hall. She let it ring. Then she answered. "Hello." Silence. Then a voice, too smooth, too casual. "Evening, Mrs. Brooks." She stiffened. "My name is Williams." A chuckle. It was Brooks on the paperwork. Names are so flexible these days, don't you think? "Who is this?" The voice ignored her question. "I'm just a friend of your late husband. He and I had a little arrangement, and since he's unavailable, I prefer to settle with the person who inherits both the home and the honor. You understand?" Grace felt the kitchen tilt. "If this is about life insurance, there isn't any. We already settled the estate in court." "Oh no, ma'am. I'm not interested in the court's crumbs. Daniel owed me. And in this life, debts are like winter. They come whether you want them or not." "What do you want?" Pause. She could hear muffled music in the background. A sports game, maybe. The clink of glass. The voice returned, velvet wrapped in wire. $98,000. Due soon. Grace's breath caught. "That's impossible." "Not my problem. I'll be in touch." The line went dead. Dear viewers, what would you do if a stranger called your kitchen and named a number bigger than every dream you've ever dared? Would you scream, pray, run, or stand your ground, even when the ground feels like it's falling away? Grace didn't sleep. She pulled a sweater over her shoulders and went to the garage with a shoebox of old keys. The concrete floor bit through her socks. She tried Daniel's gray tool cabinet first. Locked. She tried every key and found none that fit. She held the cold metal in her palm like bones. Then she remembered the basement, the crawl space, the storage bins labeled with Christmas lights and baby clothes. She dragged a step stool, climbed carefully, and pulled down a box titled Wiring. It was heavy. Wrong kind of heavy. Inside, she found a thick manila envelope. Receipts. Handwritten tallies. Names with amounts beside them. And at the bottom, a business card with no corporate logo. Just a number and 2 words, pressed in black ink. Cash first. The knock came just before midnight, 3 fast taps and 1 slow. It sounded like a code. Like the way men signal each other in dusty parking lots behind bars. Grace froze. Her children were asleep. The house was a cradle she could not afford to drop. She turned off the kitchen light and peered through the side window. A car idled at the curb, an older Crown Vic with mismatched hubcaps. A man in a leather jacket stood at the door, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the street. She didn't open it. "Who is it?" she called through the wood. "Delivery," the man said, bored. "I didn't order anything." He sighed. "Lady, open the door. I ain't here to hurt nobody." She didn't move. He slipped an envelope under the door anyway and walked back down the steps, whistling some tune that didn't belong to the night. The car eased away. Grace waited until the headlights were gone. Then she picked up the envelope with 2 fingers as if it might burn. Inside lay a photocopy of a contract. Daniel's signature, a figure circled in red, the same 98,000, and a note scrawled in fresh ink. "We're patient until we're not. M." The next morning, Grace drove to the small brick church and sat in the parking lot, hands gripping the wheel until the skin whitened. The steeple rose against a pale sky, a familiar needle pointing toward heaven. She walked into the sanctuary and found Pastor Eli in the second pew, reading. He looked up, eyes warm, layered with the sorrow he carried for everyone. "Grace," he said gently. "Sit with me." She did, and she told him everything, the call, the number, the letter, the midnight knock. Her voice shook, but she kept telling it because sometimes saying a thing out loud is the only way to keep from being devoured by it. Pastor Eli listened, elbows on his knees, hands folded. "Do you know the man's name?" "Only an initial, M." He nodded slowly. "There are men who make their living lending rope and then shaking the tree. They thrive on fear." "What do I do?" "We'll go to the police," he said. "You'll bring what you have. You'll document everything. You won't meet them alone. And Grace," he hesitated. "You'll tell Caroline." Grace flinched. "Why would I tell her?" "Because danger doesn't stop at property lines. If Daniel owed men like this, then both families could be targets. Whatever he hid from both of you. And the safety of children is never a question we negotiate." Grace stared at the stained glass light pooling across the carpet. She thought of James's thin shoulders, of Michael's stubborn jaw, of Lily's careful kindness. She nodded once. "Okay, we tell her." Grace texted Caroline from the church parking lot. "We need to talk. It's about Daniel's debts. Concerns James too." Caroline responded within minutes. "Where?" They met at a small diner off Dixie Highway, the kind with laminated menus and a bell that jingled when the door opened. The waitress recognized Grace and tried not to look too long. Caroline arrived with James. He slid into the booth beside her, clutching a paperback superhero novel but not reading it. Grace spoke first, voice steady. "Someone called. Claims Daniel owed $98,000. Caroline's face went white. "Oh my God." She dug into her bag and pulled out a wrinkled notice. 3 days ago, I found this taped to my apartment door. I thought it was a prank. But..." She pushed it across the table. "Same number, same letters, cash first, same initial, M." James shifted, listening despite himself. "Mom, it's okay, baby," Caroline murmured, then looked up at Grace. "What do we do?" Grace swallowed. "We go to the police, together, and we don't open our doors after dark." Caroline nodded. It wasn't friendship yet, but it was a line drawn in the sand, a promise that whatever storms came would be faced shoulder to shoulder. The 3rd precinct smelled like coffee and old carpet. A detective named Rosen met them in a cramped office. Gray tie, gray hair, gray day. He listened without interrupting, tapping a pen against a legal pad. "You're describing a predatory loan operation," he said at last. "Not strictly illegal if there was a contract. They came to my door at midnight," Grace said. "And they called a miner's residence," Caroline added. "They taped a note to our building." Rosen nodded. "Intimidation skirts the line. If they threaten you, if they trespass, that's different. Save the voicemail, document the visits, keep all paper. Do not meet them alone. If they're tied to anything bigger, guns, drugs, stolen property, we'll take it from there. But," he spread his hands, "if your husband signed for money, they'll push to collect. The law can't erase a signature." Grace felt the floor shift again. "So we're sitting ducks?" "No, ma'am," Rosen said. "You're citizens. That means you have rights and neighbors and a police department that still knows you by name. You call us if they breathe wrong on you. And you consider talking to a lawyer about bankruptcy or probate protections. The law may not be quick, but it's not blind." He handed them his card. "Keep the kids' routines normal. Predators feed on chaos. Don't give them the smell of panic." 3 days later, Grace took Lily to the IGA for milk and bread and the kind of apples that don't bruise when little hands drop them. She pushed the cart down an aisle of cereal when she felt it, the sense of being watched. A man turned the corner. Leather jacket. The same posture from the porch, relaxed but coiled, as if his body were a question mark with a knife for a period. He smiled without warmth. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, as if tasting the name. "We keep missing each other." Grace's pulse spiked. "My name is Williams." He shrugged. Names, paperwork, truth. So many words for the same dance. I prefer numbers. He leaned against the shelf, knocking a box of corn pops to the floor. 98,000. Interest started last week. The meter is running. You can't talk to me here, Grace said, voice low, steady. There are children. His eyes slid to Lily, who pretended not to look, then back. Children are why I always give a discount, ma'am. Kindness of my heart. His mouth twitched. Tell you what, I'll stop by Friday night. We can discuss terms. Maybe I take the car title now, a payment plan later. Doesn't have to be ugly. Leave us alone. He picked up the cereal box, dusted it off, set it back. A mockery of courtesy. Then he leaned in, his breath carrying a ghost of mint. Never confuse alone with unseen, Mrs. Williams. Friday, after dark. He walked away, hands in his pockets, whistling. The aisle felt smaller after he left, like fear had inhaled the air. Lily slipped her hand into her mother's. Mama, Grace squeezed back. I'm here, baby. Grace called Detective Rosen from the parking lot. He told her to go home by another route and to expect patrol cars to cruise the street for the next few nights. He told her not to be a hero, heroes fill cemeteries. That afternoon, Pastor Eli arrived with 2 deacons. They checked the windows, replaced the porch light, installed a deadbolt on the back door, and sat with Grace at the kitchen table while Lily did homework and Michael, silent lately, bristling with the storm of a boy turning into a man, stood watch at the window like a guard dog without bark. We stand together, Pastor Eli said quietly. This isn't just your fight, Grace. The Lord gave us a church for a reason. Michael said nothing, but he nodded once, a small soldier's vow. Friday night arrived like a held breath. The house was more than locked. It was fortified with faith and phone numbers on speed dial. A patrol car cruised past every 30 minutes. Lights off. At 8:43 p.m., the porch sensor flicked on. Shoes on the steps. A shadow. Then, a note slid under the door. No knock. No voice. Just a white rectangle like a tooth. Grace picked it up with shaking hands. 3 words. Typed. Next week. Cash. No signature. No initial. Just the promise of more. Dear viewers, fear isn't just a scream or a broken window. Sometimes it's the note that says not yet. Sometimes it's a calendar becoming an enemy. Sometimes it's living your life between a school drop-off and the worry that something waits when you come home. On Sunday afternoon, while the kids were at youth group and the house exhaled for the first time in days, Grace returned to the garage and opened the tool cabinet with a crowbar borrowed from Pastor Eli. The lock gave with a tired sigh. Inside, ordinary tools, a cracked level, a box of nails, a metal lunch pail. She opened the pail. Beneath a folded napkin lay another envelope. Inside that, a small ledger wrapped in plastic. She carried it to the kitchen table, peeled the plastic away, and opened it. Dates, figures, names, and 1 page marked with a corner fold where the pen had pressed so hard it etched the paper. At the top, a single line. If I miss, the job covers it. Blue Barn, back room. Blue Barn. It wasn't a place Grace knew, but the name felt like a door with a light behind it. Caroline met her at the edge of town, at a gravel pull-off where old billboards lean and weeds argue with chain link. They left the kids with a neighbor who baked casseroles and kept a gun safe. If this is stupid, say so, Grace murmured, sliding into Caroline's car. It's stupid, Caroline said, turning the key. Let's go. The Blue Barn wasn't a farm. It was a pool hall behind a feed store, a long low building with blue painted siding and a neon beer sign wavering in the dusty window. Several pickups slouched in the lot, and a man with his cap pulled low smoked by the door. Inside, the air was made of smoke and old country songs. Men leaned over pool tables as if confessing to the felt. A chalkboard menu offered chili, wings, and silence. Grace and Caroline took a corner booth. They waited, A waitress with a ponytail asked what they wanted. "Information," Caroline said before catching herself. "2 coffees, please." The waitress returned with mugs that tasted like a long night. She set them down and leaned in. "You ain't from here." Grace glanced around. "We're looking for someone called M." The waitress's expression didn't change, but her eyes did. They cooled. "No M here." Grace reached into her bag and slid the ledger to the edge of the table. "He used to come here with Daniel Brooks." A man at the next table looked up. Another shifted his weight. "Names are stones in small towns. You don't throw them without making ripples." The waitress's jaw tightened. "You need to go." A shadow moved in the doorway to the back room, the one the ledger had named. A man stepped out, older than the one in the cereal aisle, taller, with a gray beard trimmed to a knife's edge. His gaze landed on the ledger like a hawk on a field mouse. He walked to their booth and smiled without heat. "Ladies, you appear lost." Grace felt the room shrink around him. "We're not lost. We're collecting answers." He tilted his head. "Answers carry interest." He tapped the ledger. "You must be the wife, the other wife, or are you the chorus? Hard to keep track these days." "We're mothers," Caroline said, voice flat. "And you're frightening the wrong kind of people." His smile didn't move. "There is only one kind of people when 98,000 is involved. Paying people. Your man promised a job would cover it. He died before the job finished. That leaves you." "What job?" Grace asked. He studied her. Then he shrugged as if tossing away a shoe. "Classic contractor cross-stitch. Labor, materials, a few payments misdirected, a few resales off the back of a truck. Blueprints move. Cash moves. Don't look so shocked, Mrs. Williams. Men who build houses sometimes build problems on the weekend. Your husband was good at both." "So you're saying Daniel stole?" Caroline said. He splayed his hands. "Such an ugly word. I prefer misallocated." His eyes sharpened. "But here's the thing. The source of the debt doesn't change the math. You're on the hook unless you find a way to settle the account or give me something more interesting. Names, accounts, tools. I'm a businessman. I accept collateral." "We're done here," Grace said, standing. He didn't move, didn't raise a hand, didn't threaten. He just spoke softly, the way a snake might admire the sun. "Next Friday, the cinder lot behind Harlan's Auto. Noon. Bring what you have, titles, cash, or collateral, or I start removing pieces from the board. Not the children, their father's mistakes aren't theirs. But cars disappear. Jobs dry up. Landlords get spooked. I prefer clean pressure." He slid a card onto the table. It was blank except for the letter M and a number. "And ladies," he tipped an invisible hat, "don't call the police. It spoils the flavor." They left into a blue dusk that felt like warning. Back at home, Grace sat on the edge of her bed while rain pawed at the window. She thought of Daniel installing cabinets, laughing with a pencil behind his ear, telling Michael to measure twice, cut once. She thought of his hands, the same hands that had signed the ledger, the same hands that had touched 2 women with the same promises. She whispered into the dark, "What did you do?" No answer came. The dead reply in echoes. Dear viewers, in America, we have an old saying, "You dance with the one that bring you." When trouble knocks, your circle matters more than your courage. Courage runs hot and burns out. Community holds. Grace called Pastor Eli. She called Detective Rosen. She called Mrs. May from next door, who had lived through 2 wars and 3 husbands and kept a shotgun that had retired more rumors than threats. She called her brother, Aaron, a forklift operator with a back made of rope and a smile made for easing fear. They gathered in her living room. Pastor, detective, neighbor, brother, Caroline and James, Michael and Lily. The kids played a board game on the carpet, eyes darting up when adult voices lifted. Detective Rosen laid it out. "You don't meet them at Harlan's. If you drive there, a patrol unit shadows you. If they block you in, we move. If they threaten, we arrest. But do not hand them a title and do not hand them $1. These operations dissolve when light hits them. They thrive when they convince you that the law is theirs to bend. What about the debt contract? Caroline asked. A civil court can sort what's real and what's usury, Rosen said. But they won't show up there with a notarized ledger. They'll show up with smiles and shadows. The moment they cross a line, extortion, threat, coercion, we take the line back. Pastor Eli looked at Grace. You won't be alone. Not for one single minute between now and then. I'm setting a church schedule. Daytime watchers. Nighttime watchers. Nobody gets to say they didn't see. Not in this town. Mrs. May patted the shotgun case at her feet and said nothing. That was enough. Later that night, after everyone left and the house remembered how to breathe, Michael knocked on his mother's door. He didn't come in at first, just leaned on the frame like a man older than his shoulders. Mom! Yeah, baby. Did Dad love us? The question sliced her in a place no bandage reaches. She patted the bed and he sat. He stared at his hands. I don't know who he was, Michael said. I don't know what else is going to fall out of his pockets. But did he love us? Grace wrapped him in her arms and felt his ribs like the slats of a fence she had to mend. Yes, she said, the word trembling with truth and tears. Your father loved you. Love and sin can live in the same house, Michael. That's the broken part of being human. He failed us, but love didn't fail you. Michael nodded, jaw tight, eyes wet but defiant. Then we fight smart, not scared. Friday at 11:52 a.m. The sky hung low and heavy, the color of old nickels. Grace drove to Harlan's auto with Caroline beside her. Detective Rosen's unmarked sedan followed at a polite distance. A patrol car lingered 2 blocks out. Harlan's lot was a rectangle of cracked asphalt with oil stains like ghosts. An abandoned trailer sat crooked at the back fence. They pulled in, waited. At noon exactly, a tan SUV rolled in. The man with the cereal aisle smile stepped out, leather jacket, easy swagger. He opened the SUV's rear door and leaned in, saying something to someone unseen. Then he waved and approached them, hands empty. Right on time, Mrs. Williams. Mrs. Caroline. We told you, Grace said quietly. We're not paying. He clucked his tongue. That's a shame. I brought you a gift. He stepped aside, and a second figure climbed from the SUV. A woman. Sharp bob, business suit, eyes that counted before they looked. She held a folder. This is Miss Pike, he said. She makes paper sing. Miss Pike opened the folder, pulled out a set of photocopies, and fanned them like a card trick. Lien agreements, transfer forms, payment schedules. We can make this tidy in 30 minutes, or messy in 30 seconds. Is that a threat? Caroline asked. That's a calendar, Miss Pike said, almost bored. You're lucky. M doesn't usually do grace periods, but he likes the kids. Soft spot. Grace took a breath, steady as Sunday. We're done here. You can leave on your feet or in cuffs. The leather jacket man's smile sharpened. Cuffs? For a conversation. For extortion, Detective Rosen said. Stepping from his car, badge up, voice calm. 2 uniformed officers appeared at the lot's edge like punctuation marks finally placed. Hands where I can see them. The man's smile faltered for the first time. Miss Pike closed her folder. Detective, so nice to see the city still cares about small business. You 2 step away from the ladies, Rosen said, and away from that SUV. He glanced inside, saw the back seat empty, a blanket tossed aside. IDs. Now. The man lifted his hands, but his eyes darted toward the far fence. The weak spot, the place where someone might run if they'd planned for this. Miss Pike's lips pressed thin. Detective, she said mildly. This is harassment. Rosen smiled without humor. This is Tuesday. He nodded to the officers. Check the vehicle. Check the trailer. One officer moved toward the trailer. The other circled the SUV. The leather jacket man watched, posture still loose but eyes calculating, as if deciding whether to turn this into theater or retreat. He flicked a glance at Grace. "You made a mistake, Mrs. Williams. You brought daylight to a night business. Daylight stings, but night always returns." Grace held his stare. "So does morning." The officer at the trailer called out, "Detective, you're gonna want to see this." Rosen walked fast, hand near his holster. He yanked the trailer door. Inside, shelves, tools, boxes with labels half torn. Brand new appliances still in wrap, dishwashers, stove hoods, a stack of hardwood flooring. He turned slowly toward Leather Jacket and Miss Pike. "Receipts for these?" Neither spoke. Rosen nodded to the uniforms. "Probable cause based on the ledger. Turn around. Hands behind your backs." Miss Pike lifted her chin, the only part of her that moved. The man shuffled as the cuffs clicked. In the distance, a second patrol car slid into the lot, tires whispering. Miss Pike looked at Grace with a thin smile. "You think this is the route? Honey, this was a branch." The man leaned across the hood as the officer searched him. He turned his head just enough to speak low, for Grace alone. "You really want the route? Ask your dead husband about Marrow Street." "He's dead," Grace said, voice steady. "Then ask the house he built there." He grinned cold. "And the people living inside it." Dear viewers, sometimes when one storm breaks, another appears behind it, bigger, darker, older. Just when Grace stepped into the light with police at her side, the shadows pointed to Marrow Street, the name itself like a bone, like a secret cut to the center. Grace watched the officers lead the pair away, watched Detective Rosen arrange for the inventory of stolen goods, watched the afternoon grow less gray. She felt relief. For the first time in months, she tasted it. And yet, the man's words clung like smoke. Marrow Street. Grace looked at Caroline. "Do you know it?" Caroline shook her head. "But I can ask around." Rosen returned, face set. "We've got them on possession of stolen property and attempted extortion. It'll stick at least long enough to make their partners nervous. Go home. Rest. Keep your phones close. I'll have a unit pass your houses tonight." Detective, Grace hesitated. "He said something about Marrow Street." Rosen's eyes sharpened. "Where?" "Ask the house he built there," Grace said. "And the people living inside it." Rosen's pen hovered over his notepad for a heartbeat. "I'll look into it." He squeezed Grace's shoulder, a quiet reassurance. "You did good." That evening, after the kids dozed on the couch and Caroline took James home and the patrol car glided by like a lullaby in motion, Grace stood at the kitchen sink, staring into the backyard where the swing set still creaked when wind pushed it. She whispered into the glass, "Marrow Street." The words felt like a dare placed on a map. Beat. She opened the ledger again, page corners worn by her fingers. She flipped back through dates, through names, until she reached a small notation she had missed before, scrawled in Daniel's hurried hand. M.St. 1412. Ask S.J. 1412. S.J. The pieces had faces now. Not answers, not yet, but faces. Dear viewers, we saw the kind of danger that doesn't knock politely. We saw men who lend rope then tug until families fall. We saw a mother refuse to yield, a community show up, a law that still knows how to stand. But we also heard a new whisper from the grave, Marrow Street. What will Grace find at 1412 Marrow Street? A house Daniel built? A family he protected? Or another he betrayed? A crime that paid for the ledger? Or a secret that sets everyone free? Hold that breath with me, dear friends, because some doors, once opened, change not just a life, but a town. And if this journey moves you, like this video, subscribe to Voices of Reality, and tell us where you're watching from tonight. Dear viewers, if you were in Grace's shoes, with a name and an address haunting your kitchen window, would you go knock? Or would you let the past keep its teeth? Dear viewers, some streets carry more than mail and morning joggers. Some carry debts, fates, and names written in pencil, erasable to some, permanent to others. And sometimes, a street holds the last truth a dead man left behind. Grace Williams did not sleep the night the name Marrow Street dropped into her kitchen like a stone. She folded laundry that didn't need folding and paced the hall until the floorboards learned her prayer. By morning, resolve took the place of fear's echo. She called Detective Rosen. She texted Caroline. And at noon sharp, with the late autumn sun brittle and bright over Louisville, they drove. The route to Marrow Street cut through neighborhoods stitched with porches and mailboxes dressed for fall, cornstalks tied with twine, plastic pumpkins with gap-toothed grins, the American flags slanting in a light wind. They passed a little league diamond, empty now, its bleachers silver and patient as old bones. Caroline drove. Grace watched the GPS arrow crawl toward the unknown. They didn't speak much. Some drives should be given to silence, dear viewers. Silence and the way the heart measures time with its own rough rhythm. Detective Rosen followed in an unmarked sedan, a steady shadow 3 car lengths back. Marrow Street wasn't much to look at. Narrow, old, lined with single-story homes painted in variations of hope. Number plates crooked. Lawns trimmed with more care than money. 1412 was a small place with pale blue siding and a white door. A wind chime made from spoons tinkled lightly on the porch, a sound that could make a person forget danger if they weren't careful. A plastic tricycle lay tipped on its side in the yard like a fallen crown. Grace noticed what others might miss. New gutters, clean fascia boards, trim painted by a hand that cared. Daniel's hand. She recognized his lines the way a pianist recognizes a favorite hymn. She and Caroline climbed the 3 porch steps. Grace knocked. The door opened on a woman in her 40s with kind eyes sharpened by years of waking up for other people. Dark hair pulled back, sleeves rolled, posture steady. The kind of face that had learned to be a lamp in rooms where darkness insisted on staying. "I'm Selena James," she said, voice even. "Folks call me SJ. Can I help you?" Grace swallowed. There it was, SJ from the ledger's scrawl. "My name is Grace Williams. This is Caroline. She glanced at the trim again, at the newness around the edges. "We're here because of Daniel Brooks." SJ's gaze didn't flinch. She read 100 things in a heartbeat. Grief, need, a question that might bruise to ask. She stepped aside. "Come in." The living room smelled faintly of detergent and crayons. A couch with a patched arm, a woven rug, a low shelf of picture books, a crockpot humming hope in the small kitchen beyond. Voices somewhere down the hall, women speaking low, the gentle thunder of children trying to be quiet and failing. SJ noticed the way Grace's hands shook. She poured coffee, because coffee is sometimes the only bridge between strangers and the truth. "He helped build this place," SJ said softly, as if easing the door open inch by inch. "Not the whole thing, no one man builds a house like this, but he finished what others started. He came at night so he wouldn't be seen. Said his day crews wouldn't ask questions if they didn't know. He never stayed long. Hammer, measure, cut, and go." "Why the secrecy?" Caroline asked. SJ held her gaze. "Because this isn't just a house. It's a shelter. Haven House. Women and kids finding their feet. Leaving hands that hurt. You move quiet when you're building something the wrong people want to break." Dear viewers, sometimes the good work that saves lives is stitched with thread borrowed from dark places. That's the hard truth of small budgets and large needs. And it was about to get harder. "Daniel left debts," Grace said. "Men came after us. One of them said to ask the house he built here. He said the root of it was on Marrow Street. Do you know why?" SJ stared at the coffee in her hands, then lifted her eyes. Because materials don't come free. We raised what we could. A church, 2 grant checks, the kind of donations with dimes taped to the envelope. But lumber is stubborn about price. And I started seeing brand new boxes appear. Things we hadn't paid for yet. Then came the harder words, the ones that form slowly because the truth should never be thrown. Daniel said he'd handle it. He said the supplier owed him a favor. I didn't ask. I should have. But when a woman calls at midnight with a bruise that needs a roof, you take the roof that shows up. Grace felt something inside her tilt again. So SJ finished it. He moved product off the books to get us finished. He told me it would be squared later. I believed him because the alternative was telling a mother she could sleep in a car or go back to a man who counted his rage in broken plates. I chose the roof. A little boy darted into the room then, chasing a rubber ball, his laughter briefly overwhelming grown-up shadows. He collided softly with SJ's leg, blinked up, smiled with a missing tooth, and ran away again. Behind him, a girl sat at the low shelf, tracing letters with her finger in a book about ladybugs. Grace watched, heart tightening. Love does this, dear viewers. Makes victims into neighbors, turns strangers into kin. Caroline swallowed. Are they safe here? SJ nodded once. Safe as a door and a community can make them. Danger leaves notes sometimes. We move past it. But this, she tapped the table near Grace's hand, near the ledgers and letters she had brought. This kind of danger has a bank account. It doesn't scare easily. Grace told SJ about the initials, about SJ in Daniel's ledger, about the line, ask SJ. SJ exhaled, thinking. He said if anything ever happened to him, there was something for you here, she murmured. I told him houses hold enough secrets without men stuffing more into them. He smiled, said this one might help. He didn't tell me where. They searched. Not rifling, not ransacking, respectful. Houses like this are stitched with stories. You move gently so you don't tear. SJ checked the baseboards. Caroline scanned the closet behind a row of tiny coats. Grace knelt near the pantry and felt with her fingers along the seam where linoleum met wood. A nail head shone just a shade too bright. Grace pried it up with a butter knife, lifted a loose plank, and found a tin tucked under the floor. The kind that once held cookies and now holds the kinds of letters no one sends in daylight. Inside, a USB drive taped to a folded note, and a key, small, brass, engraved with 1412B. Grace unfolded the paper. Daniel's handwriting slid across it. The same laugh-leaning slant she had loved in birthday cards and grocery lists. It felt like his voice had stepped one room over and was waiting to return. She read, Grace, if you're seeing this, I did not finish what I started. There's no excuse for what I hid from you, only fear and cowardice, and neither belongs in a man's pockets. I failed you, I failed our kids, and I failed the truth. Still, there's something I need you to know. Marrow Street is where I tried to be who I should have been. Haven House needed more than promises, and I'd already made too many of those. I took materials, some straight, some crooked, and put them where they would keep kids warm. That made me enemies. M was one of them. I believed I'd work it off. I was wrong. This key opens a storage unit behind the house, 1412B. What's inside will explain the rest. Keep it safe. Give a copy of what you find to Detective Rosen. If I'm gone, he's the only one with the spine and the paperwork to end this properly. I don't ask forgiveness, but I ask you to keep our children out of the fire I built. If there's any good left in my name, let it belong to them. Daniel. Grace folded the page with hands that wanted to shake and wouldn't let themselves. SJ led them outside to the alley behind 1412. A weathered fence leaned into a narrow lane. Beyond it sat a row of old storage cubbies, the kind properties add when closets give up the fight. Each door bore a plate. 1412A, 1412B, 1412C. Grace slid the key into B. It turned with the tired grace of something that wanted to be opened. Inside, on a shelf, sat a small lockbox and a banker's box labeled in Daniel's hand. Haven/receipts/M. Detective Rosen, who had kept a careful distance out front, joined them now, flashlight low, eyes scanning. He set the lockbox on the shelf, studied the simple latch, and used a flat screwdriver from his pocket. The lock surrendered. Inside lay copies of invoices with handwritten corrections, a spiral notebook of dates and initials, and a phone, old, scratched, powered off. Rosen bagged the phone, pressed the side button, and waited. The screen trembled to life, a cheap Galaxy wallpaper blooming. He navigated with a patience learned the slow way. Call log, texts, notes app, HM. He read quietly at first, then aloud. Drop 2x sync, 8 p.m., Harlan's East Gate. Blue Barn backroom, cash first. Marrow, deliver late. SJ priority. Dolan wants his cut. He looked up. Dolan? SJ frowned. Inspector Ray Dolan. City Inspector. He signed off on our final inspection. I thought, her voice thin-threaded there. I thought we were lucky he moved fast. Rosen's jaw worked. If Dolan was shaving approvals and taking side money, that shifts this from bad debt to corruption. That's not just a ledger. That's a fuse. A low growl of an engine rolled into the alley. A black SUV coasted past the opening, too slow to be random, too careful to be Sunday. It didn't stop, but a silhouette in the passenger seat turned. A face behind tinted glass, a shape more than a person. The SUV continued on, a shark deciding the tide was wrong. This time, Rosen's hand hovered near his hip. We're done here for today, he said, voice even. SJ, you keep the doors locked and the porch light bright. Grace, Caroline, home routes that aren't obvious. And don't be alone tonight. I'll have a cruiser sit at the corner. He bagged the phone and the notebook, photographed the invoices on his cell, and looked at Grace. You did the right thing opening this with me. Remember, light. They hate it. That evening, SJ texted Grace a photo. A sheet of paper taped to Haven House's mailbox. No police. 3 words. Blocky and impatient. Grace forwarded it to Rosen and Pastor Eli. Within 20 minutes, a half-dozen church members were on SJ's porch with folding chairs, thermoses, and the kind of calm a neighborhood learns after decades of birthdays and funerals. Mrs. May took the middle seat like a colonel on leave. Someone brought brownies that tasted like spite baked into sugar. The porch became a small arc in a growing storm. Dear viewers, in America, a front porch is more than boards and paint. It's a promise that the street is still yours. It's a watchtower and a confessional and a place to braid a child's hair while the sun goes down. When trouble writes notes, a porch writes back with bodies, with chairs, with presents. With we are here. Close to midnight, footsteps scuffed in the alley. 2 shadows approached the fence, stopped at the gate. They rattled it once, twice, as if testing not just wood but will. Mrs. May stood without hurry and racked the action on her old pump as if lifting a hymn note. Porch lights along the street blinked on, a constellation of the fed up. Somewhere down the block, a dog considered what justice might sound like and decided to practice. Detective Rosen's cruiser turned the corner. The shadows retreated. No heroics, just the quiet message of a street awake. The next morning, a woman at Haven House asked to speak to SJ and Grace privately. Mid-30s, tired eyes bright with a new kind of courage. She twisted a hair tie on her wrist as if it were a dial she was learning to turn down. Name's Alma, she said. I kept quiet because quiet kept us alive. But I know that Inspector, Ray Dolan. He used to show up at my old apartment building with the landlord. They'd talk outside my door about paperwork greasing. And when the heat went out last winter, Dolan said it met code. While we were heating soup over candles. Grace swallowed. Do you think he's tied to him? Alma nodded slowly. Landlord said M's guys did deliveries when stores were closed. Said inspectors and delivery men were like cousins. Both know how to wink at a door. Dolan's car has a crack in the taillight. Right side. He parks outside the courthouse like it's his living room. S.J. thanked her. Rosen wrote it all. Puzzle pieces don't solve themselves. They sit until a hand brave enough lifts them. Rosen made a call Grace didn't expect. A local reporter, soft voice, hard spine. Met them on the church steps that afternoon. Her name was Lila Hart. Notebook ready, eyes the kind that had learned not to blink when power flinched. "We can't risk the shelter's address," Rosen said. "No faces of residents. No kids. You tell this right or you don't tell it at all. But sunshine matters. If an inspector's on the take, daylight might draw bigger eyes than mine." Lila nodded. "We blur what needs blurring and sharpen what needs sharpening." She looked at Grace. "Will you go on record?" Grace hesitated, then thought of Michael's question, of Lily's hand in the cereal aisle, of the tricycle on the lawn at 1412. "Yes," she said quietly. "I'll tell the part that's mine." Caroline stepped forward. "Me too," S.J. set her jaw. "And me. If they want a house, they can come look a street in the eye." The story aired that evening, names careful, details precise. A map without addresses. A voiceover that threaded facts with empathy. No faces of residents. Only S.J. from the porch, backlit by a warm lamp, saying, "This house is where children learn that quiet can mean peace, not fear." Grace's voice came next, soft and steady. "If you knew my husband, then you knew the best parts of him were real. The worst parts were real too. We're not here to polish a name. We're here to protect children." Caroline added only what mattered. "We didn't ask to be enemies, but we won't be prey." Detective Rosen, off camera. "If someone tells you not to call the police, that's your first call." Dear viewers, sunlight traveled. Phones buzzed across the city. Comments stacked beneath the station's post. Some kind, some cruel, some offering tips. One message, flagged and forwarded to Rosen's inbox, read, "Dolan meets M at the yard by the river, Tuesdays." The next morning, Ray Dolan walked into the city permit office with the swagger of a man who had converted paperwork into power for too long to remember the difference. Gray suit, hair combed too carefully, a crack spidering the passenger taillight on his sedan, just as Alma had said. Grace did not see him there, but she saw him hours later because he came to Haven House. He didn't use the front walk. He parked 2 blocks down and cut through backyards as if fences were optional. He approached the alley with a clipboard like a badge and knocked on the storage cubby 1412. B instead of the back door. S.J. met him in the lane, chin level. Mrs. May and 2 church deacons sat on the porch within clear sight, cell phones high like lighthouses. "Inspection," Dolan said, all silk. "Anonymous complaint about structural integrity." "We're fine," S.J. replied. "File your paperwork with the city. And don't come to the back again." He smiled like a hinge. "You know how quickly fine becomes condemned with the right report?" He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You don't want this to turn into a zoning headache. Those little ones don't deserve displacement. Neither do inspectors deserve prison," S.J. said. "Which is where blackmail goes when it grows up." Dolan's smile broke. It didn't fall. It cracked. He glanced toward the porch, toward the phones, toward the street where a patrol car idled conspicuously. He retreated 1 precise step. "Expect a formal visit," he said. "Bring a warrant," S.J. answered. He left without turning his back. Predators prefer not to show a spine. That night, Rosen called. His voice carried the hum of long fluorescent hallways and coffee gone cold. "We pulled the USB," he said. "Invoices, yes. But there's more. A folder labeled Marrow. It's a ledger of payments to initials. Some match names we know. Others are interesting." "Dolan?" Grace asked. RD sits beside 5 entries, each with a permit number that fast-tracked projects in rough neighborhoods. It looks like a toll to keep the gears greased. There's also a text thread we recovered from the old phone, screenshots saved to the USB, between Daniel and a number listed as M. Rosen read, "Deliver late, SJ first, RD covered." Another, "River Yard Tuesday, bring list, no cops." And then the last one, weeks before Daniel died, "Clock's running out, pick a family to pay." Silence stretched thin. "Grace," Rosen said gently, "I can't promise how fast this moves, but it's moving." The broadcast helped. The porch helped. The paper trail helps most. "What next?" Grace asked. "A warrant for the river yard." And a quiet ask to a state investigator who hates dirty inspectors more than rotten lumber. Fear rarely leaves without throwing one last match. 2 nights later, at 2:11 a.m., a rum bottle firebomb arced toward the back of Haven House. Amateur work, mean work. It struck the new siding and hissed out against fireproof wrap Daniel had insisted they install when no one was looking. The bottle shattered. Flames bit and died. A security light snapped on. Mrs. May's porch brigade woke in one motion. Rosen's cruiser roared from the corner. 2 figures bolted through the alley and vanished into dark like bad decisions. Neighbors arrived with garden hoses and blankets. Children cried and then stopped crying. SJ stood with her hand on the wall where heat had licked and whispered a thank you that wasn't to any person. Dear viewers, sometimes the good a sinner did becomes a shield the living need. That fireproof wrap, one quiet act of conscience, turned flame into smoke and smoke into resolve. Tuesday came with a low sky and the smell of the river in its pockets. Rosen, a state investigator named Holt, and 2 patrol units rolled into a gravel lot behind a chain-link fence near an old warehouse with peeling letters. Ransom Materials. No one named Ransom owned it now. Names shed owners like snakes shed skins. The forklift idled. 2 men in neon vests argued quietly beside pallets stacked with lumber still bearing shipment tags. A rusted shipping container sat crooked, door padlocked, fresh tracks new carved in the mud. Warrants unfolded like wings. Holt's voice was polite and iron. The lock snapped under a cutter. Inside the container, boxed appliances, flooring, copper coil spools. The same ghost goods found in Harlan's trailer. A notebook lay on a crate, its first page crisp. Collections, A phone buzzed in one vest pocket as a man's face fell. He reached instinctively. Rosen shook his head. Hands where I can see them. On a whiteboard leaning against the container wall, someone had scrawled a schedule. Tuesday, D10:30. Friday, Harlan, 12 o'clock. Holt took a photo. Dolan, he said softly. 10:30 on Tuesdays. At 10:28 a.m., a Silver City sedan with a cracked passenger taillight turned into the yard, saw the cruisers, and turned right back out. A patrol car eased after it as gently as a shadow. Holt didn't chase. He called. The phone rang on Dolan's passenger seat. He didn't answer. Holt left a message. Ray, it's Holt. We have your calendar and your river friends. If you like your pension, bring a lawyer and your conscience to my office by 3 o'clock. By 2:40, Dolan sat in a gray interview room with a gray lawyer and a face suddenly pale as paper. He swore he never took cash. He swore he never knew M. He swore his signature on expedited permits meant only efficiency. Rosen slid the USB printouts across the table. Holt slid the whiteboard photo. A long silence followed, the kind that drags a chair across a floor inside a man's head. Dolan spoke at 3:12 p.m. words first to save himself. Then, perhaps because some men remember the difference between a job and a life too late but still in time to matter. He gave up M's name. He gave up 2 drop sites. He gave up a bank routing number that matched payments Daniel had written RD beside. He gave up next Tuesday's plan. Dear viewers, it's easy to hate a man like Dolan. It's harder to hold the complexity that sits in a human chest. He oiled a machine that crushed the vulnerable. He also opened a door the day he finally stopped lying, before someone else lost a home or a life. In stories like this, villains sometimes pick up a thread of redemption and pull. Justice doesn't require liking them. It requires using what they give to stop the harm. That evening, Grace tucked Lily in beneath a quilt her mother had sewn years ago. Tiny squares of old shirts turned into comfort. Michael stood in the doorway, pretending not to stand guard. "Are we safe now?" Lily asked. Grace smoothed her hair. "Safer today than yesterday. Safer tomorrow than today." Michael glanced at the window, at the porch light, at the patrol car's slow pass. "What if they come back? Then we meet them with light and law and neighbors with coffee stronger than fear," Grace said. She looked at her son. "And we never open the door to hate, not even a crack." Michael nodded, jaw set. Lily slept, hand curled around a stuffed rabbit missing an ear. Sometimes healing looks like small sleep in a safe room. 2 mornings later, a courier delivered formal notices to M's warehouse and to Dolan's attorney. Subpoenas, asset freezes, and a civil filing from a non-profit legal clinic on behalf of Haven House and residents unnamed. In careful legal language, it accused them of a scheme. Stolen goods, extortion, code manipulation, threats. Rosen called Grace. "We move now. It'll be loud. Don't check the news until after school pickup. I don't want the kids hearing numbers before they hear your voice." Grace thanked him. Then she sat at the kitchen table and cried. Not the shattering kind, but the kind that washes a face after a long road. She laid Daniel's letter beside her coffee and whispered, "This part, you did right." Late afternoon light slanted warm across the Williams' living room when the knock came. A slow, deliberate rhythm that tried to make itself sound like normal. Grace checked the side window, the leather jacket, the cereal aisle smile. Alone this time, she did not open the door. She turned on the porch camera with a tap and put the phone on speaker. Caroline, already on her way, listened from her car. Rosen, 1 street over, listened from his. Mrs. May listened from her porch with the calm of a history book. "Go away," Grace said through the wood. "Now, is that how we talk to old friends?" The voice purred. "I heard you've been on television. Congratulations. Fame is expensive." "So are lawyers," Grace said. "We bought the right kind." A small pause. He shifted, stepping into camera view. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You made a mistake bringing daylight to a night business. Now the night knocks on your door." "Daylight's sitting across the street," Grace replied. Patrol lights flickered once. A quiet wink. "And the law has your calendar, your container, and your codes. You left more footprints than a county fair." Another pause. The smile faltered. Men like him count fear. When the numbers drop, they recalculate. He leaned close to the door, voice thin. "One last chance. Give me the phone and the ledger. I walk away." "You already did," Grace said. "And you walked into a camera. Goodbye." Sirens rose 2 streets over. Not for him, not yet, but enough to bend the air. He backed away, hands up in a mock salute, and left without turning. The way predators do when the field is no longer theirs. On Sunday, the church filled beyond capacity. Not for a spectacle, but for steadiness. Grace sat with Michael and Lily, Caroline and James beside them, SJ behind with 2 residents who kept their faces low and their chins high. Pastor Eli preached from a short verse and a long life. Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream. He didn't say names. He said neighbor and courage and truth. He said we don't win by replacing cruelty with cruelty. We win by refusing to become what we fight. People stood when the benediction ended. Some hugged, some wept, some left quietly because grief likes privacy. All left knowing a thing towns sometimes forget. We are together. Late that afternoon, Holt called Rosen. Rosen called Grace on a 3-way. Voices snugged close by the wire that stitches a city together. Warrants executed, Holt said. Warehouse secured. 2 associates in custody. Paper trail shows your husband tried to steer materials into Haven House when the ring wanted them sold cash. He bought trouble that he couldn't pay off. The debt's a lie will unwind in court. Grace closed her eyes. And not yet, Holt said. He's slipping, but he'll surface. Men like that always do. Arrogance needs air. When he does, Rosen added, we'll be there. Dear viewers, look at 1412 Marrow Street again in your mind's eye. The spoon wind chimes, the patched rug, the crockpot humming hope, a wall that still remembers heat but doesn't fear it anymore. A man's sins fed a ring of greed, but a different act from the same man. One quiet insistence on fireproofing a wall kept a house full of children from burning. That's not absolution, it's truth. And truth is the only foundation that doesn't rot. Night fell kind over Louisville. Grace stood on her porch with Caroline, S.J., and Mrs. May, watching the patrol car make its last loop. The air felt different. Lighter at the edges, heavier at the center where a name still hadn't been cuffed. Caroline squeezed Grace's hand. When he's caught, what then? Grace looked toward the dark where the river moved, silent and sure. Then we tell our children what their father did wrong and what he did right. And we build a life that doesn't need shadows. Her phone buzzed. A text from Rosen. Court date set. Protective order granted for Haven House. Dolan to testify. Be ready Monday. Grace exhaled. Monday. Dear viewers. The turning point was finally on the calendar. A courtroom where paper meets consequence. Where voices meet record. Where fear meets law. And in that room, secrets would not just be revealed, they would be judged. Before we step into that room, if this story speaks to you, like this video, subscribe to Voices of Reality, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And ask yourself, dear friends, if a secret knocked at your door wearing danger's smile, would you open it alone, or would you call your people and stand in the light? Dear viewers, some rooms change a life before a single word is spoken. Courtrooms do that. They smell like polish and paper and consequence. They carry a quiet that isn't peace. It's the waiting before truth remembers its voice. Monday's sky over Louisville stretched winter pale as Grace Williams walked up the courthouse steps with Caroline at her side. Michael and Lily were with Grace's brother, Aaron. James with a neighbor who'd turned babysitting into a mission. S.J. followed with 2 residents from Haven House, their faces steady, their backs straight with the new knowledge that they belonged anywhere safety demanded. Detective Rosen met them at the door, tie square, eyes gentle. You're not alone, he said, 6 words that can turn fear into footing. The hallway outside Division 6 hummed with low voices and the squeak of shoes on waxed tile. Lawyers carried boxes like pilgrims with offerings. A bailiff, stone-faced but kind-eyed, checked names with the precision of a clockmaker. Grace stood by the window, hands clasped, staring out at a city that had held both her dreams and her undoing. Caroline squeezed her shoulder. S.J. handed her a peppermint, the small charity of Southern women who know anxiety when they see it. Good for nerves, S.J. said. My mama swore by M. Mine too, Grace replied with a flicker of a smile. And then, like a shadow deciding it wanted to be seen, Ray Dolan turned the corner with his attorney. He looked smaller in daylight. Men do, dear viewers, when the walls are made of record. If you've never sat through a hearing that might change your future, know this, time slows. Every whisper echoes. Every pen tap feels like thunder. And every face, the good, the guilty, the uncertain, becomes a mirror you can't help but read. Commonwealth versus Ransom Materials et al., the clerk called. Related matter. Protective order for Haven House and petition for injunctive relief. The judge, silver hair, careful eyes, took the bench. The room rose, sat, breathed. The prosecutor outlined it clean. A scheme of stolen building materials, cash collections, code favors, intimidation. She named the documents, the USB drive, the ledger, the phone logs, the whiteboard from the river yard, the inventory from Harlan's trailer. She did not name the children. She did not need to. Then came Dolan. He swore the oath with a voice that wobbled at truth. The prosecutor's questions moved like a steady tide. Mr. Dolan, did you accept payments, cash or otherwise, in exchange for expedited approvals or to overlook code deficiencies? He cleared his throat. Yes. From whom? He hesitated, then, from individuals associated with them. I know him as Markus Hale. From contractors who took direction from him. A ripple moved through the gallery. A name. Names anchor shadows. Did you communicate with the decedent, Daniel Brooks? Yes. He called when he needed inspections moved. He also told me, Dolan swallowed. He told me he was steering material to a shelter. I told him to stop. He said he couldn't. There were kids sleeping cold. He said I had children too. I do. His voice thinned. I kept taking the money. That's on me. Did Mr. Brooks owe Mr. Hale money at the time of his death? Yes. Hale considered the missing material a debt. He said if the man wouldn't pay, his family would. Dolan closed his eyes briefly. He used the word collateral. Did Mr. Hale ever threaten Haven House? He left notes, sent men at night, wanted the house on a leash. Those were his words. Dolan stared at his hands like they were strangers. I should have stopped this months ago. Dolan's lawyer tried to trim the damage. You're testifying to save yourself. Yes, Dolan said plainly, and a long, honest breath seemed to leave his chest. And to end what I helped start. Sometimes truth lands not with fireworks, but with the dull, heavy finality of a box being set down. SJ took the stand next. She spoke the way good leaders do, without show, with weight. Haven House is a shelter. Women and children. We don't publish our address. We don't advertise our fear. We cook, we read, we heal. Mr. Brooks helped finish the walls. He told me secrets cost more than money. He was right. She told the court about the notes, the midnight rattling at the gate, the firebomb that died against fireproof wrap a man insisted she install. Why tell the fireproofing detail? The prosecutor asked gently. Because it's true, SJ said. And truth matters on both sides of a man. He did harm. He also did good. Our kids are alive because of material he placed behind our paint. I won't lie to make him simpler. Simple stories don't protect people. True ones do. They called Grace. She stood. A woman who had buried a husband, a marriage, and an illusion, and still found enough breath to speak. My name is Grace Williams. Daniel Brooks was my husband. I learned at his funeral that I was not his only wife. A murmur. That's the day my grief changed shape but never left. She told the story in a slow thread. The call at night, the envelope under the door, the cereal aisle, the porch camera, the ledger in the lunch pail, the key under the kitchen floor at 1412 Marrow, the USB, the phone that remembered what men prefer to forget. Do you fear retaliation? The prosecutor asked. Grace looked at the gallery, at Caroline, at SJ, at Rosen. Less each day. Fear hates company. Why appear today? Because my children deserve a record that says their father's debt was a lie used to hurt us, not a truth that should haunt them. Because Haven House deserves peace. And because a town needs to remember that daylight is not rude. It is necessary. Caroline took the stand last among the women. She did not pad the truth with comfort. She laid it straight. Daniel Brooks lied to me for years. That is true. He also left me with a boy who deserves a future not measured in someone else's threats. That is truer. I'm here because James and his siblings are victims of a man who collects families like spoils. I'm here because we are done being collateral. The judge leaned forward, fingers steepled. words measured. Protective order granted for Haven House and for Williams and Caroline households. The court enjoins any contact by defendants or associates. Temporary asset freeze approved. The Commonwealth has met its burden for probable cause regarding theft and extortion. Inspector's conduct will be referred to the state. This court exists to deter exactly this, predation upon grief and need. He paused, gazed steady on the gallery. This case is about materials and money on its face, but it is about power underneath. And this court takes power that preys on the vulnerable very seriously. Gavels don't thunder in real life. They tap, decisive, small, final in their way. Dear viewers, sometimes justice is a choir. The cop who keeps showing up, the pastor who brings chairs, the neighbor who puts on a porch light, the reporter who aims her lens carefully, the prosecutor who stacks facts like bricks, the judge who sets a line on the ground and means it. One voice won't do it. A town decides. The hearing ended. Papers shuffled. People exhaled. Out in the hallway, Lila Hart, the reporter, closed her notebook with a nod that said, "We told it right." Rosen checked his phone, eyes narrowing. "What is it?" Grace asked. "Tip line," he said. "Anonymous. M at River Warehouse now packing. Black van. East Gate." He looked at Holt, who was already moving. "Let's go." Rosen turned to Grace. "Go home with the church caravan. Locks, lights, phones on loud. We'll call." Grace nodded. Caroline gripped her hand, then let go, like passing a torch. "Bring him in." SJ lifted her chin. "We'll hold the porch." The river lot wore late afternoon sun like armor. Trucks idled. Men pretended not to be in a hurry. The east gate hung open, a giant mouth daring someone to name it. Holt's sedan slid in quiet. Rosen's unmarked followed. Two cruisers ghosted behind. Officers stepped out like commas, slowing the sentence to something readable. A black van backed toward the container row. A man in a leather jacket stood by the driver's door, scanning the yard with the contempt of a person who cannot imagine losing. Markus Hale, M. The smile that once leaned on a cereal shelf now thin as wire. "Police," Holt called. "Hands where we can see them." Hale did not lift his hands. He opened the van door instead. Rosen's voice sharpened. "Don't." Hale froze, turned his head, and smiled like a man who still believed he had the pen. "You going to shoot me over plywood?" he sneered. "We're going to arrest you over people," Rosen said. Officers fanned. The driver tensed. Hale gauged distance, angles, outcomes. Men like him are human calculators until the math runs out. The driver bolted. A cruiser cut him off. An officer took him down clean. Hale pivoted to run. Rosen moved first, an economy of motion built on practice and care. He pinned Hale against the van. Cuffs clicked. The world shrank to two wrists and a truth at last unwilling to move. In the back of the cruiser, Hale leaned forward, voice low, aiming for one last wound. "This doesn't change what your little widow owes me," he hissed. Rosen shut the door with a quiet that sounded like a line being drawn. "You'll have time to miss your own voice," he said. Holt inventoried the van. Tools still in retail straps. Boxes marked with hardware stores that would soon identify serials. A folder labeled Accounts RD with deposits that matched Dolan's confession. Hale watched through the glass as daylight counted his sins. Arrogance needs air, dear viewers, but glass starves it. Word traveled the way good news should, carefully, then all at once. The porch at 1412 Marrow filled with neighbors who didn't need details to feel the balance of a street shift. Grace, Caroline, and SJ sat together under the spoon chimes while children drew with chalk on the walk. Houses, sons, a dog with too many legs. Michael sketched a badge. Lily traced a heart. James wrote his name big, then crossed it out, then wrote it again larger as if to say, "I am not smaller because someone lied to me." A week later, arraignments turned into indictments. Dolan entered a plea deal, cooperation in exchange for a shorter road to consequence. The ring's driver flipped next. Harlan took a deal. The yard foreman followed. A structure built on quiet fear collapsed under recorded speech. In civil court, the judge signed the order severing the fake debt from the Brooks estate forever. The words on the record mattered more than any rumor. This court finds, he read, that any claim of debt against Mrs. Williams or Miss Caroline, related to the alleged obligations of the decedent, is null and void as a matter of law and equity. Further, the court affirms the protective status of Haven House and recognizes the vital public interest in its continued, undisturbed operation. The gallery didn't cheer. Courtrooms don't do that. But you could feel a breath move through the room, the kind that has been held too long. Grace went to the cemetery at dusk. The grass had grown in. The stone had been set. Daniel Brooks, 1979 to 2025. No epitaph. She hadn't known what to carve then. She stood with a letter in her pocket, the one he'd left under the floor, and a small scrap of paper with her own words. "You broke us," she said softly, "and you saved strangers. Both are true. Both will be told. I won't lie for you or against you. I'm going to raise our children on truth, the kind that keeps houses standing." She placed the scrap beneath the stone. It read, "Light stays. Healing didn't come as a miracle, came as Tuesday dinners. Homework done at a kitchen table where fear no longer sat. Michael asking questions that were harder and better. Lily sleeping without a nightlight. James coming over to throw a football in the street while Caroline and Grace laughed at how badly both of them threw. Haven House painted a wall in the common room a color they named mourning. Someone hung framed prints of wildflowers with names beneath them, Coneflower, Black-Eyed Susan, Bee-Balm, so the little ones could point and claim them. SJ wrote a grant application that didn't apologize for needing money. She titled it, "A House That Chose Light." The city, new eyes, new oversight, funded an expansion. The spoon chimes stayed. Dear viewers, what do we do with a life that splits into mercy and betrayal? We tell it true. We don't flatten it to fit our comfort. We don't excuse harm because a good deed hid inside it. We hold both, and we choose who we become because of it. Grace didn't receive a fairy tale ending. She received something better. A community that remembered how to be one. A house that remained, and children who learned that truth, not denial, is love's real backbone. Before we close, lean in with me for a moment. If you were Grace, finding out at a funeral that your husband carried a secret big enough to rebuild a house and break a family, what would you do? Would you hide? Would you rage? Would you knock on Marrow Street? Would you testify even when your voice shook? Dear viewers, tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what choice you would make if danger knocked with a smile. Your words might be the porch light someone else needs tonight. And if this story reached you, please like, share, and subscribe to Voices of Reality for more. We tell the hard stories slowly, with care, because truth deserves time,